First Nations, Indigenous peoples that have come all the way to UK through the support of our organization, the Indigenous Environmental Network platform, and the New Internationalist magazine that have come here to Climate Camp to talk about the role of British Petroleum and some of the UK financial institutions like Barclays, who a group just went and did an action against, I believe, and Royal Bank of Scotland and HSBC, who are all invested in Canada's tar sands, which is the most destructive and largest development ever in the history of mankind. So we're going to be doing all kinds of activities all week. Take one, pass it back. Take one, pass it back. There you go. And these are the activities. We're also going to be filming, screening a film here so you can actually see just how psychotic Canada's tar sands development are. So a little bit about the organization that I work for. I'm Cree. I'm from northern Manitoba, Canada, and I'm the tar sands campaign organizer with IEN. And as Jeff mentioned, our organization has been fighting for a number of years to support American Indian, Canadian-based First Nations, and Alaskan Native nations in their fight for environmental justice against the fossil fuel regime, against the mining sector, against big forestry, and all other corporate interests that have been disproportionately targeting our people's way of life, our land, our sacred earth, our sacred water, our sacred air, for the purposes of capitalism, for the purposes of, this crazy, infinite, expanding economic system that we're all victims to. But of course, in the context of North America, certain communities, and by certain communities I'm referring to racialized communities, that's African American, Native American, new immigrant communities, because of systematic racism, these communities unfortunately are not privy to environmental protections. They're not privy to the same kinds of privileges that the so-called dominant community in North America or European descended community is privileged to. And as such, in the case of Canada, we see that in Canada, if you take all of the oil and gas, all of the mining, all of the forestry, and you lay down all of those sites where the most toxic and destructive industries are operating, you'll see that they're all sited within 40 kilometers of a First Nations community. Okay, and this is called environmental racism. And so our organization, which has been around since the early 90s, has been working to support communities through, supporting different kinds of actions training, supporting media work, media campaign work, to basically magnify the issues that First Nations are facing to the world and to amplify their voices to the world. Because as you know, there are a lot of people out there with a lot of great ideas, but sometimes ideas, although maybe they may be based in a good place, could actually exacerbate the on-the-ground impacts that First Nations people are facing, or local frontline communities. And a perfect example of this would be, say, carbon trading. There are a lot of people that believe that they can offset Canada's tar sands. Okay, they think that, hey, if we plant a plantation in the global south, or if we protect a certain amount of trees in the form of some kind of national park, well, that'll offset what we're doing in the world's largest and most destructive project. But what we know is that these kinds of market-based solutions, although they look great on paper, it's a nice little accounting scam, will do nothing to alleviate the on-the-ground human and ecological health crisis that has emerged as a result of, again, the world's largest and most destructive project. Now, a little bit about the tar sands in our campaign. The tar sands development is the second largest oil deposit on the planet, second only to the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. But this isn't your conventional kind of oil. Okay? This is 10% oil mixed with 90% clay and sand spread out over an area that's bigger than the country of England, okay? And the current operations in tar sands represents a size of land that's roughly, the size of Vancouver Island. I don't know if any of you know Canadian geography, but it's really, really big. And you can see the toxic tailings ponds that are created through the tar sands process from outer space. Okay, that's how big this is. There's enough natural gas burned every day in Canada's tar sands to extract the oil from the sand and the clay by superheating water, which is a precious resource in the region. All the water comes from the Athabasca River, which local communities have relied on for thousands of years as a food source and as a water source. It extracts vast amounts of this water, superheated with natural gas, 600,000 cubic feet per day to be exact, which is enough to heat 340 million homes in Canada for 1 year. Every single day they use that amount in tar sands operations. So the scale...
6 million cubic feet.
6 million, 300...
600 million cubic feet a day.
600 million cubic feet. Thank you, McDonald. McDonald sees me. And so, you know, like, there are 77,000 workers in Canada's tar sands to make it all possible, 55,000 of which are flown in from thousands of miles away. The large majority of the workforce working in northern Alberta to extract tar sands oil from the earth there come from Canada's Maritimes. And, you know, so that in itself represents a psychotic contribution to CO2 levels, you know, just to fly the workers in, because they come in for 3-week cycles, they go back home for a week. You know, it's crazy. And so, if left unchecked by the year 2030, tar sands emissions alone from the project, and this is not including, you know, the burning of the oil extracted in American tanks, American warships, American cars, because 80% of the oil extracted from Canada's tar sands is headed straight to the United States, okay? Will represent 177 million tons of CO2 per year, which is more than every single plane, train, and automobile in Canada. Okay, the tar sands is second only to the vast network of coal-fired power plants, which you all have some experience with here in UK, is second only to the emissions of coal-fired power plants in North America. So the tar sands represents probably the #1 reason why Canada is such a criminal in the context of the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, and why they absolutely will not meet their Kyoto commitments that they've made, and why they are doing everything they possibly can to make sure that no progressive international climate policy comes out of COP15 in Copenhagen this December. 80% of the world's petroleum resources are controlled by nationalized state petroleum firms, but Canada's tar sands aren't. They have the lowest land leasing rates on the planet, the lowest royalty regime on the planet, and so therefore we have all of the big oil and gas companies, ExxonMobil, British Petroleum, Shell, Total Fina from France, and everyone else lining up at Canada's doorstep to come in and get a piece of this action, because it has become the final Wild West for, you know, global criminal climate outlaws, basically, you know, greenhouse gangsters. And you know, so ways for you to plug in and support local communities, to support organizations that have, you know, taken a step against this, is to get involved with organizations here in Britain and the UK that are targeting groups like Royal Bank of Scotland, groups like British Petroleum, that are targeting Shell. You know, so it's really important. There's going to be all kinds of ways you can learn how to get involved here locally to support some of the leadership that is here in the communities that they're representing. Our organization will definitely be there in the fight too, but the tar sands truly is the biggest environmental crime in history. It's really important that you learn everything you can about it, and I'm just going to end there. And come to our workshop tomorrow, I think. It's on the pamphlets.